Welcome to the In Cayman podcast here with Dr. Frank McField. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I've been waiting for a long time to do this.
Yeah, man. First of all, what was Frankie saying? Let's start there, because otherwise we're not going to get back to that conversation.
Yeah, we might forget about that. But anyway, I'd written Frankie to tell him that I was coming up to Los Angeles, and because he lives there in Los Angeles, as we all know. And he wrote me back and said, "Hey, Doc, I'm in Australia. I'm doing a film out here in Australia."
Right.
And he said, "You remember us talking about that the last time, we met." And the last time, that was when we produced my play. I think that was a production that was done by what's his name, Fritz.
Right.
With Fritz.
Right. And this was in the theater. Or this was a film?
Well, it was actually this was a Fritz production of one of my plays, One Black, One White. Okay, and so Frankie and his wife came to the production, and they liked it a lot. And so we had some dinner afterwards and conversations, and then my wife decided that she would invite Frankie and his wife to our house, and our house happens to be in front of Frankie's uncle's, King Flowers, boat dock, where he goes out fishing, and he goes out fishing very often because he supplies his restaurant with fish that he catch himself.
Right.
And so I was given some fish by them, and we prepared a nice rundown for Frankie and his wife.
Nice.
So I got to know them a little bit. So I said, okay, if we go into Los Angeles, we'll look him up.
Right.
And so when I called Frankie said, "Oh no, Doc, I'm out here in Australia. I'm directing a film." And he said, "You remember we talked about this some time ago, about the little boy, the whole ritual becoming a man."
Right.
Because that's also part of a story that I developed in Playground, a play that I did called Playground.
Okay. Which
part of the story takes place in the North Sound, and the other part takes place in Notting Hill Gate in England. So it's contrasting that kind of difference in terms of socialization, and so forth and so on. So the story that Frankie seems to be working on is one that impacts that Caymanian heritage. And this is where I think we definitely always need visionaries, because that we're going to take it a little bit further than the historical details.
Right.
We are going to use those facts to weave a story that creates a spiritual heritage.
Right.
And I believe that is obviously more important than the actual factual historical heritage that we also very much need to use as a framework, and therefore we need to focus on that as well.
Definitely. It sounds like you're an artist, right? Because isn't that what the artist does? Aren't they supposed to recreate some sort of fabric of a story that tells us something about who we are, but like you're saying, expands it more than...
Or defeat us with a different layer. Because there are many layers to a reality. And so the artist is going to give us the different layers. And then, we're now sort of mourning the loss of Bendel Hydes.
Right.
And Bendel Hydes is one of the founding members of the Cayman National Cultural Foundation, which began, of course, as the In Theater Company. It became Cayman National Theater Company, and so forth and so on. I'm one of the founding members.
And when was that founded?
That was founded back in the 70s, 70-something, late 70s. First of all, we started with the Cayman National Youth Theater, and then we went on to the In Theater, and then Cayman National Theater, and then the Cayman National Theater, and evolved into the Cayman National Cultural Foundation under the leadership of Jeff Cresswell. But there were 5 founding members, and Bendel Hyde was one of the members, and it was me that introduced Bendel to Jeff Cresswell and Maureen Cresswell, and he became like part of a family.
Wow, fascinating. I mean, that was a great thing that happened when you all did that, right?
And it was very great, too, because many of the values that we have were coming, like I was saying to you, I was at Woodstock. I was like for that part of that love generation, that hippie so-called generation, that the artistic generation, that generation that was looking for freedom
and this was
and
the
expression.
This was the 70s?
This was the 70s, the late 70s, early 80s.
So now, where were you in life at that point? Because you are a doctor, you have a PhD, I assume?
Yeah, I have a PhD from Bremen University in Germany.
Okay.
Bremen University.
Yeah, and in what?
Well, it's interdisciplinary. It's an interdisciplinary degree because at that particular time, we didn't believe in the segregation of the disciplines. We believed in the interdisciplinary approach.
Right. I guess that was like kind of the new approach at that point.
Well, it was a very important new approach that was brought in basically by Jewish intellectuals who understood very well that in every reality there are different layers. And so that we were trained, most importantly, to be critical. So we did critical communicative analysis. So in that particular sense, communication was important, and and being in Germany and studying in Germany, communication was all what it was all about at that particular time.
Right. Huh. Fascinating. So, did you do undergrad anywhere?
Well, I actually was. I went to the Borough of Manhattan Community College.
Okay.
I graduated with a 69.90 average.
Nice.
Failed my English Regents exam.
Okay.
And I got a scholarship because at that particular time, what America was doing, America was preparing to build its black middle class.
Okay.
Or to improve it, to increase it, to strengthen it as a part of the social.
So you got a scholarship from the U.S.?
Yes.
Wow.
I got a full scholarship.
Right.
A scholarship.
And where was this? Where did you go?
Well, I went to the Borough of Manhattan Community College,
right.
2 years, graduated from there. And then I went on to Richmond College, which was an experimental college, an upper 2-year experimental college.
Yeah, in New York?
Yeah. And all of the professors were Jews. So it was very, very, very highly intellectualized. And so I was exposed to that whole culture of questioning.
And what was your degree there?
I studied in the area of sociology, and we had Professor Fisher. I think at that particular time, I kind of forget it. So now it's quite a long time, but I entered. I was chosen for a study abroad program through Queens College, which is a part of City University of New York.
Right.
And so as a result of that, I spent the summer of 1970 in England, in London. So I went to England for the first time.
Right.
Then I decided that I might want to go back to England to study. And my professor, who was a man called Lawrence Orbach, and he is a big publisher, Quattro Publishing, and him and another fellow, they formed a company. They published the first book about blacks in England. I think that was published in 1970. And they got involved in the publishing business, made tons of money off of publishing, became a millionaire off of publishing. But it was Lawrence Orbach. His father was a Labour MP in England, and he brought me back and he got me up to York. So I went to York University, studied under Gwyn Williams and James Baldwin. Now, James Baldwin and Michael Crichton, who wrote the Cayman Islands book, worked together. So I actually was taught by one of the guys that worked along with Michael Crichton.
Michael Crichton wrote a book about Cayman?
Yeah.
Which book that is?
He is Founded Upon the Sea. It's Founded Upon the Sea.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking of the Jurassic Park author.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Right.
No, so he was sorry. Maybe I'm going too far, but
no, that's fine. So wait, hold on though. I want to pinpoint you in Cayman. So when you finished up at New York, what year was that?
I was transferred. I was a transfer student, exchange student from New York to Old York.
Funny.
Yeah, it's very funny because that's where Constantine the Great was crowned Emperor of Rome by his soldiers in 306 AD.
The same one that converted to Christianity?
Yeah, that created Christianity.
No, we'll get there. You're saying he's responsible for creating Christianity?
Yeah.
Personally, not Christ?
I mean, nobody can create us anything other than the empire. Everything that is created on behalf of the empire, by the empire. And anybody that argues different is mistaken.
It's like a city of God question. I think, isn't that what Augustine tackles, the two realities of the empire and like God's kingdom, how they interact? But let's not get too far there. So where were you born?
Well, I was born actually out on Chardin Road across there from Miss Emily. I'm by the shop there. There used to be a house there, the two-story building there on Chardin Road, in Mary Street. I was born on Chardin Road, but I grew up then in Mary Street because my grandfather then had a house on Mary Street. But I mean, I come from that particular generation. I had problems in school, so I was being beaten all the time. Of course, nobody realized about dyslexia at that particular time. I'm dyslexic, terribly dyslexic.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I have all good problems in terms of how I organize myself and my whole things. But I was saying, and even in rewriting some stuff last night, that we used to say, thought made a man run a mile and shit a pile. So you should I used to say, so give up the goddamn thinking.
Right.
You're not supposed to think.
Yeah, sometimes you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to live in that moment. And I think when you're thinking, you're not living in that moment. You're living in the past or the future. But there's time for that.
Well, I have the feeling that we are living in several dimensions at the same time.
Right.
So... And when we begin to understand, for instance, the string theory, the string theory gives us an idea that certain things like that is happening. Also, when we dream, and if you check the dream and the way we dream sometimes, that the dream is so real that there's no one that could say that what I'm feeling now is realer than dreams that I've had.
Yeah, I've had dreams come true, where I had a dream that I even wrote down. I used to write my dreams, and then they come true. So it's like, how was my dream able to know that a future thing was going to happen unless it was connected in some way, right? Which I think is what this train of thought leads us. There's a non-time connection with everything,
right? So the life is more than one dimension. So it's multi-dimensional existence. And what we're doing is mostly because we are trained to focus on this reality and not another part of the reality. And so sometimes some of us are, because of perhaps our childhood, and in my particular case, I would say because of my childhood, because I spent a lot of time alone, I spent a lot of time thinking, and I can't even remember what I was thinking about and why I would be thinking in any case, where I got the ideas and the words and different things to think at that particular time. But I obviously was thinking. And it could mean that we're thinking because we think that we come to this world without any kind of knowledge. And so that is where sentience, for instance, become SCIENTENCA, I think it is sentience.
So you believe that we're born with knowledge? Because that's a debated philosophical question over the centuries. People, they differ on that. Some say it's a blank slate, but you think that there's already.
I mean, that's Aristotle's idea of it being a blank slate.
Right.
Is intended to be different, I think.
Than Plato?
Than Plato, because Plato is talking about recollection.
Right. Right.
So Plato and Aristotle are not necessarily on the same page here. But Plato and Aristotle wasn't on the same page with a lot of things.
But yet they kind of were.
Yeah, well, I mean...
They just explored different... I think... So let me get where you're going at with this. You think that we're in an Aristotelian type of age and we need to go back to a Platonic sort of understanding of things. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I mean... I don't know why... yeah, I think as a person you can have both. And naturally you're one or the other. And I think that was the difference between Plato and Aristotle. Aristotle was one way and Plato was another. But
well, I think that Aristotle lacked the Egyptian influence that Plato had.
Interesting.
And the Egyptian influence is that there were a lot of things that they didn't explain deliberately because it would cause such a debate that you would never finish it.
Right.
And so what they tried to explain was what was necessary to be explained, mm-hmm. but you left the rest up to the option of the individual that is in that mm-hmm. Situation mm-hmm. or in that reality, mm-hmm. and it's same like if I drew a picture, or if I write a play. Do I write everything in there? Can I, or do I, or is this, or are there elements that are missing? Audience, for instance, mm-hmm. participation.
Okay.
And if we go back then to the whole idea of the mystery, and the mystery that we're talking about is a mystery that is first of all become apparent to people somehow in ritual. Mm-hmm. It's through the ritual that we come to this idea mm-hmm. that we are not in one static reality, mm-hmm. that we are in more realities than one, or the realities are transparent, I guess would be the word.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's funny is I've noticed that trend, I think, since the pandemic. I find a lot more people are open to that
thought.
Yeah, that thought, that newer, that multi-layered reality, rather than the hard, deterministic, scientific reality, which got us very far and will still continue to get us far. But I think I've seen some who are on that end now kind of flip and embrace a more holistic interpretation of things, which allows you to break the rules of science
right
from time to time, which of course the hard determinists don't like, mm-hmm. right? They don't ever want to see that happen.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. That's a very, very important point. And this whole ability in terms of are we perceiving first and then knowing, or knowing and then perceiving?
Yeah, that's I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean that's a perpetual question.
Right.
Now, one of the things that I was interested in from the beginning is that when I come to the point of philosophy and religion, mm-hmm. philosophy was a higher sense of thought,
right?
Or thinking and applying the thoughts to an examination
right.
of the reality of other people,
right.
as well as oneself, but
mm-hmm.
also in terms of those persons in Plato's time that became very critical. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we find is that, or at least I find, because I believe in Plato so much mm-hmm. that I think I was dreaming of Plato.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's relevant.
Right? But then there was an old man that told me that I was going to be a philosopher when I was a young kid on the island.
Okay.
Before I left to go to the States.
Right.
And I'd been kicked out of school many times because I said I'm dyslexic. They would beat me. They didn't know anything about dyslexia. Mm. And so I would run away from school. Mm. But he told me I was going to be a philosopher. His name was Montero. Mm-hmm. Now, Montero is the character in Downside Up.
Okay.
The name of the character in Downside Up is Montero.
Okay. I've seen it.
Yeah?
Yeah. I saw Downside up in...
Yeah. And I always thought that Montero was from Honduras, but Montero, it turned out that Montero is from Nicaragua.
Is that right?
And I only realized that when I went to Nicaragua, I moved to Nicaragua, and just after that,
you moved to Nicaragua
in 2005.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Well, I mean, my wife is from Nicaragua.
Okay.
My girlfriend at that particular time, she was from Nicaragua.
Okay.
And so I decided to go down to Nicaragua, and I just sitting outside one night and just say, "Oh, Montero wasn't from Honduras. Montero's from Nicaragua." And then somebody say, "Well, you didn't know that." Blah blah blah. So I had somebody to give me the information. What I'm saying is that was something on my mind that question needed to be answered.
Right.
So there was a reason why I needed to answer that question.
Right.
I haven't figured that out yet exactly what that reason was.
Right.
But the way in which Nicaragua became structured into my life, after all of this time, that I had been like a servant to this man. I used to empty the slop pail, right? Because his wife was blind and he had like something wrong with his foot. But he was like what people call an obeah man. Okay, but he was really a medicine man.
Okay.
He healed people, he washed people, he cleansed people.
Right.
He was using a traditional African spiritual healing.
Right.
And that's what our people have abused. They have abused people for believing in this difference between religion and spirituality.
So you feel that ritual and rituals is a replenishing good for society?
Yes, and I would take you back to Egypt.
Right.
If we go back to Egypt, you see that in the Egyptian civilization, that was the longest lasting civilization that ever will be. Mm-hmm. Right? It lasted a long time. And it was very sophisticated and tremendous scientific development.
Right.
It influenced the gospel, it influenced the way we are today and the way we think today.
I mean, Jesus grew up in Egypt for a couple of years, right?
Well, definitely, because they had to tie the stories in. There's a reason why Jesus, I called my son out of Egypt.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
I can't remember which gospel that's in, whether or not Mark, Luke, or John. But it could probably be in Matthew.
I love how you said that as if, it was a purposely deliberate thought to tie in.
Yes, Egypt.
By an author.
Yes.
I mean, is the Bible a story? And to what degree is it? And to what degree is it not? Is it a historical book? Most people tend to look at it that way, which I think doesn't serve them well.
No, it's. I don't think the Bible is definitely not historical. I mean, because people.
But that's how people judge it. That's the criteria people use against it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that was its.
And it's an Aristotelian judgment, right?
Right. I mean, because it didn't set out to be a historical book. It didn't. It's what it did. It was trying to teach us, at least the New Testament, is trying to teach us how to be spiritual, how to overcome religion.
Right.
Of course, we get entangled in the contradictions between the very writers and their relationship to the society and the authorities in the society.
Right. I think that's still a struggle today. People have a hard time accepting a religious Christianity and then also accepting the church which stands for it, because they can see all the terrible things that the church has done. So that's just a big contradiction for a lot of people, for everyone.
No, the most evil institution is the church, right? If you go and look at it,
because the greatest good, right, is the church as well. Doesn't it stand to say that the greatest evil, like they're connected in some way?
The yin and the yang,
right? Christ and the Antichrist.
The Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel, the altar and the sword.
Right.
So
the good and evil runs through each man. Good and evil runs through each man's heart.
And this is the nature of flesh and spirit.
Some awesome stuff.
Yeah, and I mean when we begin to deal with it more and more, we find out that it should not necessarily be our only preoccupation, but I mean, I believe that when you die and go to heaven, you go to a philosophical heaven.
Not a material one?
Not a material.
It's funny because before the podcast started, I was thinking, like you've always been very hard to pin down, right? But obviously very spiritual and religious. And I wanted to figure out if you were Christian, but you just answered the question. You're not.
No, but I mean, I'm Christian.
Well, so you're a Gnostic.
No, well, yes. I mean, I have a bit of a problem defining myself according to definitions that have already been
but you just
created.
did. You said you believe heaven is a non-physical realm, which is a Gnostic Christian.
Yeah, it's a non-physical realm, right? I mean, Jesus. See, the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is knowledge.
Very Platonic. I'm hearing it. I'm hearing Plato all day. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but Christianity is very clear. There is a material resurrection to this thing. The word became incarnate.
Incarnate. Well, right? I mean, the incarnate.
It materialized itself in some way in an eternal reality, I would say, is the Christian definition, which you seem to reject. I wonder why. Is it really just a Platonic thing? Well, let me ask you this. Does the size of the universe have something to do with that?
Yeah. The science of the universe suggests that the Platonic thing is right.
Wow, I can't believe you're saying that, because I actually used to believe the same thing. I was a Gnostic until I found Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I don't know if you know him. He's an evolutionary writer, theologian, and through his theory, I was able to see how actually the universe still converges on God and rising through the material world through the evolutionary process. So the size of the universe, according to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, is not necessarily the expansive galaxies, but it is its evolutionary time. And when you measure things according to evolutionary time, it is just as long as just as massive as the galaxies, but there's a direction, a material direction that is always accompanied by spirit and consciousness, right? From plants to animals to humans. So then he projects that forward into to a final culmination. My only point is that if that evolutionary structure to the universe is a thing, it can happen on other planets, and so the size of the universe doesn't matter. It all culminates on God anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, what happened is that we got confused in defining God. Our big mistake was to define God, and God was defined first of all from an ethnic, primitive perspective. We can go back and we can see that. And nobody should really even come and debate it, because it shows the stupidity of most Christians and most Christian leaders in particular, who don't want people to think, because they figure if they think they will lose them. No, you will not lose them. They will evolve. And because it's saying that we can only see reality in a certain way, that we can only feel, because that when we believe that we only have 5 senses, I believe we have 6 senses. They call that sentience, which is the one that you're born with, which is the one that I was able to maintain longer than most people, because I was dyslexic and they couldn't train me the same way. So I had to learn everything different.
Interesting.
And because I had to learn everything different, and because I could never feel secure that what I had learned was gospel, I was always in a state of change, and change is the only reality. There's no reality other than change. And so when people say, oh, well, you change your position. Oh, well, you're not like that. Oh, you change. Blah, blah, blah. Well, sure you change.
Right.
You're not a static mole. And I'm saying back to Plato. You see, Plato has said so many things, but Plato was influenced by the Egyptians.
So why was Aristotle not?
Well, you see,
because he was Plato's disciple.
Yeah, well, I mean, he went along with Plato, but when you get into the imperial thing and you start empirical evidence, and you start mixing empirical evidence with spiritual truth, you get a problem. You have a problem. And I think that Paul is telling us that.
What's he saying?
Well, I mean, Paul is basically saying that we are using the material to be able to introduce us to the idea. But we have to go.
But Paul is also saying more than that.
You have to go beyond that. If you're using the idea of Jesus, you're using an example of Jesus Christ.
Sure, Paul was very clear about the resurrection, though. So I agree, we should use the material, and Paul talks about using the material to reach the divine.
The whole,
there's still a resurrection for Paul.
Well, I mean, the people are talking about the resurrection,
and and remember he contrasted with the Greeks. He was in Athens and Greece preaching, and that was like one of the things. Like, what are you talking about? Resurrection, which basically means material into eternity, right? So that was a point of contention for Paul and the Greeks.
Well, we're talking about new bodies, that you would be given new bodies. That the body that you're in now is just like a tent. Yeah, but look, I mean, this is all very complicated in terms of us just trying to do it like this because it's hard to get the structure that we perhaps need to demonstrate what I would like to show. Because what I think is that people mixed Egyptian scriptures.
Okay.
Right? Because if you take, for instance, the whole idea of slavery and Hebrew slavery in Egypt, there was no Hebrew slavery in Egypt.
What do you mean?
There was no.
You think that's just a story?
It's not. It's people using stories, other people's stories, or connecting with other people's stories and integrating them into.
So what is that story trying to say?
Well, the story is the real story. The only one that anybody is focused on, which is the story of coming into the world and going back out of the world. Where did we come from, and where are we going to when we leave?
Right.
Some people are saying, well, we had to come from someplace, so we're going back where we came from. And that was a very logical answer to primitive people. And once they could say, certainly, and this is one of the reasons why I think it's so important for people to study African stories. Because when I was a child, I was given the stories. I was able to benefit as a child in Cayman from my African heritage, because Cayman had a great African heritage. I know about the Dapis. I was able to see when I was reading about the Egyptians and the Egyptian idea of the different compartments of the soul, of different parts of the soul, and they get to the part of the Ka, which is the only part that is transfigurated after death, to know that that's my Caymanian Dape. So I say, I can argue with you guys now because I understand what they're talking about.
Right.
And I remember seeing the movie The Shining in Colorado in 1984, Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And it was really an incredible thing because that whole idea of the Dapi, that thing that haunted me, that I always felt it would haunt me, and I could see the Dapi and this and that. And my Dapi came by and Dapi. You look at my plays, they're talking about the Dapi and different things like this. But the Dapi, my father told me, has a sweet smelling odor, a bright light, and a sweet and a sweet smelling odor. That is the same thing for the Ka, Ka. You look it up. Now
I love that connection, by the way. That's super cool.
Hey, that's super cool. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're talking about Frankie, because Frankie is doing a movie, and it's about like the indoctrination, inducting a young boy in the Siemens tradition. And then what we're doing is we're finding this light in there, that somehow that there's a magic in the Siemens, this the rugged individual.
Well, it's the same story that you said. He leaves home and goes on his adventure, right?
Yeah. So when we think now of the Egyptian story, and you go back and you see the Egyptians were so educated, so wise, there was no comparison with those people.
Right.
What happens when you find the competitions between groups of people, and the other one tries to elevate his accumulation of so-called knowledge about the other one, and we get mistaken about it. But this journey of the soul, because what we are doing now is we are the spirit, where spirit is taking a journey in this flesh. But the flesh is just like a shell, like the hucks.
See, I dislexia. I used to be a Gnostic, my friend. Yeah. I used to be a Gnostic.
And if you go back now to the story if you go back to the story in Matthew's with the Davis, the so-called rich man.
Which Matthew? Oh, the Gospel of Matthew?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The rich man and the
Lazarus?
And Lazarus.
Okay. What happened
Because
now?
most people think that's about being rich. And holding your wealth from people.
Right. Because Lazarus used to beg for scraps from the table, and then they both died, and then Lazarus was in heaven, I guess, and the rich man wasn't.
Yeah.
And the rich man said, "Can Lazarus just dip some fresh water in my tongue or whatever?" So what is that about for you?
Well, it's about the meaning of the religion. It's about what is the core of the religion. What is the seed rather than the hucks.
And what is that then?
Well, what it is that the people, the Jews, are holding their secrets. They're not telling, which means when we say the Jews, we're talking about the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the other people. We're not talking about an ethnicity. We're talking about a caste, a professional caste of people who attend to certain spiritual and religious issues, who are advisors of the leaders, political leaders and military leaders and countries. So it is important that we understand that what we're given in church is the hucks, not the seed.
Yeah.
Not the seed that must die in order to be born again. So you have to look beyond the immediate preoccupation that people have in terms of what they want to answer. Because as long as we are involved in what people want to answer now, we don't get to the point of what needs to be answered in order to comprehend particular things. I said, and this is the reason why I started saying that I studied from the 60s critical communication analysis, which means that we were always looking at things critically. We're not looking at things to find salvation, to find a solution, to have something to talk about. We're looking at things because we are looking for truth.
Right.
And the truth is elusive in most cases.
Yeah.
And therefore, we don't condemn people because they didn't get it yet, or they made a mistake here,
right.
Or we don't,
or they believe whatever they believe,
and we're practicing this today and practicing something tomorrow, and we don't go mock them because they're doing that, because they are still in the journey of the soul. The whole idea of this Exodus. Exodus is an Egyptian story. It's not a Jewish story. And this is where people are coming up with this whole thing, where people believe that whoever owned the religion is superior to those people who don't own the religion. And the question then is, who really owns the religion? When we go back...
None of them.
None of them. When we go back and we look more into history, we look more into the development of how humanity develops and all the things, well, we see that everything is being crossed at all times. We might always...
Yeah, why not, right? That's string theory, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's there's common dreams and similarities.
Yeah.
One of the things I find fascinating, I don't know if you ever heard of René Girard. Have you heard of him? A French theologian. Anyway, one of the things that's fascinating is the phenomenon of sacrifice, animal and human sacrifice, and how all religions across the world, across the different continents, had that similarity to them. And I think, there's a lot of mix and mash going on throughout history, I think.
Now, if you go back now to the plants, you go back to nature, you go back to the mangroves, you go back to those things, You go back to the importance of trees.
Mm-hmm.
Why is a tree important? Why would Osiris end up in the other part of the world, going through the Nile into the other part of the world?
I don't know that story.
And he's found, one of the things is he's found in a tree.
Mm-hmm.
He's caught in a tree, becomes a part of the tree.
Hmm.
It's talking about going back to nature, going back to the tree. There's a reason for the tree.
Mm-hmm.
The tree is the most important thing in life in terms of what it brings to us.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the tree.
Yeah, I mean,
so the idea of crucifixion is also the idea of going back, because there are other ways.
What's crazy to me about the author of Luke, because he wrote the Acts of Apostles too, is that in Luke he says he was crucified on a cross, but then in Acts he says in the mouth of Peter something, you hanged him on a tree.
Yeah.
And I'm always like,
yeah.
What gave him the liberality there to say that, you know?
I think it's also because they're fulfilling a ritual.
All right.
So the same ritual that Jesus is involved with is the same ritual of nature. It's a cycle.
Think these rituals,
it's a cycle.
These rituals are related. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cycle. It is demonstrating the cycle of nature,
which is particularly why I like the Catholic concept of Christianity so much, because it is very explicit in the sense that the Mass is a ritual. It is a sacrifice. It is the same sacrifice.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I love that aspect of it.
Exactly, and that's why we come to the whole thing about community. Commune,
right?
Communion,
right?
Communists,
right?
It's the same,
right?
It's the same. Okay, they try to in order to appease the ruling classes in every situation. You have to always dumb down on your intelligence, because what is it saying is that there is no such thing. There's no such thing as a centralized I. Rastaman say I and I.
Right.
There's no such thing as a I. Abraham and Abraham, he starts at Abraham, and he becomes Abraham. Now,
so you're saying that I cannot exist by itself, it must exist in communion?
The I is the socialized I, the consciousness of separation. If there's no consciousness of separation, there is no I.
Right. Fascinating. Also, what I really love fascinating about that, and also why I love Christianity, is the concept of the Trinity. And that's exactly what they're saying there. In the I, in the God I, there's actually a communion to form that I.
Right.
Fascinating.
I mean, it's also, I love the idea, and I'm on about it all. I'm on about this all the time. The idea of community. And one of Martin Luther King's books, I think he wrote in 1967, the year I graduated from high school in Staten Island, New York. And its title is Where Do We Go From Here? Community, chaos or community or community or chaos.
Right.
Community or chaos. Where do we go from here?
Right.
So if you don't have community, you have chaos.
Right.
But how do you have community without communion?
Right.
Communion is the recognition that there is no such centralized I.
Right.
There is only us.
Right. So do you like, are you at all thinking or watching the decentralized currency movement?
The decentralized?
Yeah.
In terms of religion?
No, it's crypto. All of a sudden, you're just making me think about it. Not that we need to talk about crypto, but it's that same idea. There's no centralized I.
Yeah,
there's a communion, and that's how cryptocurrencies work. There's no central. How many? Not all of them do, but some of the good ones do, right?
Well, I mean, I appreciate it.
Right. So they just exist in communion, and no one can actually change the consensus of the rules. It just is.
Because it's all the value of the dollar, for instance, is all given by all of us that participate and believe in it.
Sure, to a large extent. Yeah.
Now, the Egyptians knew this from the beginning. Okay, so this is the reason why they didn't print any coins until they had to pay for Greek mercenaries to protect them from that.
I'm glad you're going there, because I actually wanted to bring this up when you were talking about Egypt and their long civilization, and I was wondering Did they have the long civilization because they used hard money?
They use it because they didn't use hard money.
No, the opposite. Isn't hard money what you need? Gold?
No, they didn't. They didn't use it.
What they use?
They just bartered.
They bartered?
They bartered. It was a bartering
How can
society.
you build the greatest civilization ever by bartering?
Because it's the same thing when you're using money. It's bartering because the belief that you...
Bartering, there's a lot more friction than using money, though.
Well, it depends upon what stage of development human beings are and how the society is. Because you got to realize that part of the reason why we have problems is because of the pre-programs. We are already conditioned.
You mean Plato's forms?
Well, yeah. So when I say, okay, I learned to say, oh, this is me, not us. I learned me.
Yeah.
We develop the ego.
Yes.
When Cain kills Abel, that's a story. And the story is to tell us that Cain is our ego.
Interesting.
And Abel is our spirit. The bloods, plural, of Abel cries from the grave. That's what they're saying. So it is not to tell us what we are looking at it, because we're looking at it literally rather than looking at it as literature.
Right. And I know you wish more people looked at it as if it's literature, but I don't know. I mean... that many people will. That's for the few. That's for the Platonics, the Plato people.
No, well, I mean, look, I was fortunate enough to go to York, and there I met the Archbishop of York at that particular time in 1972, and then he became the Archbishop of Canterbury in 1975, Frederick. And he would not sign to the infallibility of the Bible. But you see, the people that want you to do this are the people who are part of the establishment that controls and benefits from mental slavery. When you talk about the fact that if you are good, why does somebody have to police you to get good from you?
So, would you consider yourself a libertarian? Or before you came on the show, you said you were a hippie, and you said that's what most people didn't know about you.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean...
And are those two things even related? Are you a libertarian? Because it sounds like
I don't come from the generation that was trying to cast people into categories. I mean, this is still what I'm shunning. I'm shunning this all the time. I'm saying, no, look, these categories or these concepts or these labels have been created.
Right.
And but they are not the reality.
Right. But for you, the freedom of the individual is the most important thing, not the control of the government system structure over them.
We go back to those guys like Hume and the types of people that were making these considerations because of Protestantism. And the fact that Protestantism was challenging Catholicism and the church had gone outside of what should have been its bounds. And so it had to be called into question. But it was interesting, for instance, when Martin Luther of Germany wrote his thesis, 92 second thesis or whatever it was. What they were all displeased about was the fact that the church was corrupt.
Yes.
And how could a holy institution become corrupt? Well, the people on top were the most corrupt people, because the thing about it is that religion is part of governance.
Yeah.
It is part of the hierarchy of community.
So do you think Christ did not want a church?
Christ was saying what the church is. The church is the community. The church is us. When we're more than 2 or 3 are gathered, we
I mean, but I don't know.
But isn't it though the fact that we're disconnected? And it's a question of what Christ said, I'm reconnecting you. He told the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well. This is one of the greatest stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's told with Jacob's well. Now, who's Jacob? Jacob Ladder? This is Jacob Well.
Right.
So he's superseding. This lesson is mentioning this because the writer is going to tell you now what supersedes this.
Right.
What supersedes this tradition that these people had was this new tradition that Christ has now brought to you.
Right.
Now, what? Then we go and we see what is that tradition.
Yeah. So the way you read the Bible must be fascinating. I mean, to see all these layers and to connect them and to be able to connect them critically with what you know about ritual and the different religious centers in that region. And that's a very spiritual way to read the Bible that a lot of people don't get to do.
Well, I told you that I went to a little school called Richmond College on Staten Island for 1 year, and there were Jews that taught me.
Right.
And then they took me to England.
Huh. So
I had that Jewish experience where it's about more than you see.
Right.
But you have to search for it yourself.
Right. So let me ask you this. When were you in government here in Cayman?
I got elected in 96.
In 96. So you were there till 2000?
I was there until 2000 and what,
2004, 2008?
2005.
2005.
2005, yes.
Wow, so almost 10 years.
Yeah, I was almost 8.5 years, I think.
Right,
8.5 years I was in.
And you ran in Georgetown?
I ran in Georgetown.
So what happened that first election?
Well, what happened is that I was basically defeated in terms of my aspirations to warn the Cayman Islands people about the fact that we were really not a society.
A society?
We were not really a society.
Okay.
There was no cohesiveness. There was no structure.
Okay.
What people had in relationships were families, but they didn't have anything beyond family.
Okay.
So that was a weak basis upon which to build what Britain wanted at that time, which was to remove its financial dealings in the Bahamas after the 1967 move to majority rule in the Bahamas. They wanted to move it someplace else, and this was the place that was seen, but they saw the weakness. They had the Prosser report, a report called the Prosser report. After the Prosser report, it was when they got interested in bringing me from Germany. So I was recruited from Germany.
By who?
By Thomas Russell.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
And what's the Prosser report?
The Prosser report was really basically talking about the society and the lack of structure.
And who commissioned this report?
Individualism. The Cayman Islands government would have done it through the British government, of course, the British government, through them.
Right.
Yeah, so the Prosser report. So I came with the idea, well, now we have to build a basis for a society. We have to build a society. We don't have one, I'm telling them. We have to build one.
Right.
Well, people can't take that very, very, very easily. But I, like I said, I studied sociology from the critical perspective. We did critical analysis. And we know now that means that our institutions are socializing institutions, the family, the school, the community, and so forth and so on. How are we going to work to make sure that these structures are in place? These are structures that we need to have in order to have a society and so forth and so on. Of course, nobody understands what the hell I'm talking about. I'm coming from Germany.
But you were elected.
Well, I got fired from that job.
Okay.
For writing letters to the press.
This is from Thomas Russell's recruitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it wasn't him firing me because he was always a person who understood me and accepted what I had to say because it was logical. It was not illogical. You have to build a structure in a society. I come from it. I grew up in that neighborhood. I grew up in the school. I grew up in. I know how weak everything is. I know when I look at Cayman University and I say, look how weak you are. Jamaicans come in, Filipinos come in, everybody, Hondurans come in, Nicaraguans come in, everybody come in, but you all cannot get together. Only certain ones of you can get together because you will cling to each other as long as that gives you a feeling of security to say, but look at the other ones, they're not no good, they can't get, that type of thing. So we were people that are so individualistic that it becomes detrimental to any kind of development of community.
Yeah, I don't know many Caymanians that would disagree with that.
Yeah. And one of the things, of course, that I was preaching to them all the time, I said, if you're going to have breakdowns in the family, you're going to have breakdowns in the community. And if you have breakdowns in the community, you're going to have breakdowns in the political system. If you have breakdowns in the political system, you're going to lose your economic system.
So when did you get elected?
So
and what were you running? No, there weren't parties back then.
No, I got a job at Thomas. What's his name again? Thomas Jefferson, who was Minister of Tourism, and he had the dump on his side.
Okay.
And Wally Whitaker got me a job, and after he called me up to his office, Thomas Jefferson and said, I know you like to write them letters to the paper, he said. But he said, if you F with me, I give you this job, he said, but if you F with me, I'll come back from the grave and get you if necessary. And he gave me the job, and of course I went to work with the dump, and I was like a tally officer, looking after, first one to start looking at picking up the cans and recycling and all that program. Right. And I start writing letters again, because that's all I used to do, write letters to the press and all that, because I'm a writer. Right. And of course they called me. Wally Whitaker said, didn't I tell you, Dr. Frank? He called me, blah, 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 blah. So he said, if you I wrote another letter saying we needed a Bill of Rights. And it was my letter that said we needed a Bill of Rights. It's in the document that got me fired. They fired me. And when they fired me that time, I think the people in Georgetown and everybody must have started talking and said, this is a little bit too much now. Really, they're getting on this boy. And I'd gone through a hard time. So that was my first time in. Then they re-elect me.
So what, you ran then after you got fired? How long was it between when you ran and you got fired?
I got fired from my job.
Yeah, that's what I meant. And then
at the dump.
Right. And then how long before you were elected?
Just a few months.
Really? Just a few months?
Yeah, maybe a year. Maybe a year.
So then you just ran. You decided to run.
Yeah, well, I was always running anyway. The first time I ran was in 1980.
Oh, so that wasn't the first time you ran then?
No, the first time I ran was 1980. That was what the problem is, because when they fired me for talking about early childhood education, that we needed more than the middle school, Truman Bodden had me fired. Truman Bodden did a lot of horrible things to my life and other people's life, like Roy Bodden and other people's too, because everybody that was thinking was a communist. If you were critical, God, you were terrible. I mean, you were black power, you were this, you were that. It wasn't that you were intelligent and intellectual and you had been exposed to this country and that country. No, you were just this negative. And what the Caymanian people have done, and this is why I wrote Time Longer Than Rope. I wrote Time Longer Than Rope in 1979 because I told them, I want you to remember, I told you what's going to happen to you as a people. There's no changing of that. You're going to be like the Indians on the reservation.
So when you were elected, what did you do in government?
Well, when I got elected, I was basically a McKeeva boy, supported McKeeva because McKeeva supported me, and because I could never made it from the streets to Parliament without McKeeva's support. And although McKeeva had planned to use me, he had all the plans because McKeevas are very good at using people. I still appreciated the fact that I was used at least to be able to give me the opportunity also to help other people. And then, of course, in my second term, then I became a minister through the so-called coup that they talk about, which was something instigated by McKeeva, and of course I went along with it. Now, I would truthfully tell you, I would never connected with any classes of people in this country or any individuals in this country with any special interests. And so that was my downfall because I was not in that circle and I never saw it. Right. And these guys were all puppets of somebody, especially McKeeva. McKeeva came from the Jamaican JLP party. He was an operative of the JLP, and he is responsible for a lot of the structures that were set up in this country that doesn't work favorably towards Caymanians. But the way the British government thought about settling this country and growing this country included the Jamaicans. It was not something that we decided, was Britain decided it with people like Siaga and that particular group of people, because a financial center is also a corrupt center.
financial center like Cayman, you mean?
Yes. So it's no way that you're going to be washing dirty money and nobody's going to be corrupt. I mean, that is kind of crazy. So
it's not all dirty, though.
No, it's not all dirty. But the point is there's a lot of secrets to this whole thing.
Sure.
If you look at what's happening now with Dan Scott, I'd like to use Dan Scott as an idea. Dan Scott, he goes in and he makes all this money in one lifetime because he's in the right business in this country, and so he benefits. He comes back and now he can finance this one, he can finance that one, he can even maybe put a group together if that's what he wants. But the point is that these people are never thinking about mixing. They never thinking about mixing anything. They always think that everything that is. And it's the mixture, it's the flavor of life that creates the synergies that you need in order to be able to evolve. And Cayman could evolve as a gem that is just incredible. We have the potential. We have the basis already. We're sitting on it. We understand the money game. If you go back to the Templars, you go all the way back to the Crusades, you know how the thing developed, you know how the thing worked, and how it's always going to be work. So you always have a place for yourself, but you got to keep your house clean. You know, certain things can go wrong, but not everything can hang out. You can't go wrong with yourself hanging out. You've got to keep it in. And what they have done in terms of how they organize the court system is everything is hanging out. And Britain knows, and Britain is looking, and Britain is saying, oh my God, how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to deal with this stuff? They don't know how to deal with it. The court system, and I have many cases, and one case in particular that I have on file, but several cases on file in criminal and commercial court. To have it on file, it's on file. We can go back, and this is what I was taught. We can go back through this, and we can track, and we can see the whole pattern. We can track everybody on that.
So what was your ministry that you looked over?
Well, it was women's affairs. My professor in Germany, Marlis Kruger. She's what we call good actor. Meine Gutachterin.
You speak German?
Ja. Aber sicher, ich spreche Deutsch.
Wow.
Ja, ich habe lange Deutsch nicht gesprochen, aber ich kann immer noch ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen.
Nice.
Yeah, so anyway, she said, and I wrote and said, oh, I got a job as the minister, and I'm the minister of
Women Affairs.
And she said, they put the rooster in charge of the chicken and coop. I said to myself, and because she remembered how terrible I was in Germany. And you know, so you see, my life has been a struggle, and there have been the hard parts, but there's also been the happy parts. And part of it was always that I worship knowledge. When we're worshiping Christ Jesus, a lot of people don't know it's worshiping knowledge. But there was a reason why Mary, is worshiping the Catholic Church. That she's seen as the new ark. The new ark of the covenant. And the covenant is in a relationship with this knowledge that is inborn. And
yeah, a lot of people don't tie knowledge together with Christ. A lot of Christians that we know, but you know, it's right there in the text. In John, in the beginning was the Logos, which comes from the Greek philosophical concept of knowledge.
Nous, N-O-U-S.
Right, and then the Logos becomes Christ. Logos is Christ. So Christ is very much affiliated with knowledge, like just the word knowledge.
Totally.
You know? And he does say, I am the truth. So there's a lot of synergies there that people don't really think about. But you're a Plato guy, right?
No, well, I mean, I'm also a person who was taught by Jews in my university at Richmond College, City University of New York, in '69, to see the Bible as a story, different stories, illustrating to you, teaching you certain things.
That sounds like that was a very formative period for you, like that kind of...
It was for look. I mean, that was the most important period in America, in a way.
Right.
I mean, I'm dealing today with tracking the Donald Trump story and where America is going, what the Russians are doing, what's happening in Cuba, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I'm on this 24/7.
Right.
Because nobody knows whose hand is going to move. And I was just lucky. I don't know how, but I was just lucky enough taking the journey from here to America, from America to England, from England to Germany and back here. So I have a pretty good idea, because I was in Germany at a time when there was two Germanys, West Germany and
is that
East
right?
Germany.
You were actually there during when the wall was up, the Berlin Wall?
Yeah.
Wow, where were you when the Berlin Wall fell?
Well, I was here in Cayman when the wall fell, but I actually took a trip from Bremen to Berlin, and we had to go through parts of East Germany.
So obviously you were in West Germany. That's where you went to school. Yeah. And then you took a journey into East Germany at the time?
To East Germany to get to Berlin. Berlin is in West Germany, but it's cut off in that sense. So to get from where I was in Bremen,
you had to go through East?
I had to go through the East Germany. Germany.
What was it like? What was East versus West like?
Well, I mean, I didn't have that feeling. It was just very poor and very sort of dead there. Like it didn't have life, you know. And I went to East Germany after the wall was removed and they were united. And I went to visit, and I went there again.
Cool.
Some friends had moved there from Bremen and was there. But I have the kind of experience. See, this is why a lot of times when I am talking about race and different things like that, people believe that I have a problem with white people, but I don't have a problem with white people, because it was the white people that gave me all of my opportunities. No black people didn't give me no opportunities. And I know that very well. And at 76 years old, 77 in October, I'm saying quite clearly that I tried to use the skill which I was given by God, and that was nursed by and given attention by certain people, to be fair and critical in terms of my analysis. We have to be able to know where we go from here. That's what Martin Luther said. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community?
Right.
Chaos or community. And it would be good if more of us, for instance, in the Cayman Islands, would be focusing on what the community would look like.
Yeah.
I am now I have a contract to be the writer in resident at the theater for 2 months. Something that I started with Bendel Hydes, and God bless his soul. Bendel just passed recently, and my condolences to his family and all of the people. But I feel that if we look at what we did, what's there, because we started, Jeff Creswell we started as an interracial. We weren't necessarily using that terminology, but since people believe somehow that some people want to segregate, like myself, I make them to understand that was what we stopped the Drama Society from demonstrating by doing this. And we were more successful in our approach under the leadership of L. Creswell, I call him L. Creswell after El Cid, if I'm seeing the movie. So I used to always call Jeff L. things, because I used to always think, like we're in a crusade, for art. And I write a little bit about that, of course, in One Black, One White, the play, because quite a bit of it is thinking about that whole obsession with art,
Right.
And then you're obsessed with art, and then you're poor and you get no place, and everybody get everything, and you don't get nothing.
Right.
And then when you die, they say, "Oh, that was a great person. Let's see how much we can sell this for."
Unless a seed dies, it remains just the seed. Yeah. When it dies, it bears much fruit, right? So, I mean, that's the interesting thing about some great thinkers. So I was interested in finding out what are you doing artistically now? You're totally out of that, or what? Because I mean, you have such a good mind, and I would say a fair mind.
balanced one, that it would be good to use people like you, because we have some real dead-ass people in this country, you know? I mean, some of these young people that I see come back with degrees, I said, they're a bunch of dead-ass people. I mean, they don't have no spirit. They don't have no joy. I mean, they need to find out who they are and get some joy.
I mean, it's hard in life right now to figure out where you are. You know, it's it's a different generation. Like, you know, there's internet now, and there's social media now, and you know, I mean, I think the answer is community. You know, and you know what, some of what I get to work on is my films. Those are some behind there, but I'm also working on one right now that we're going to shoot. Day one is tomorrow and the following week. Okay. Called Awesome Man. A 19-year-old kid named Asher Lopez wrote the film, and he's directing and starring in the film. Wow. We have a big crew that's working on that one.
And you all get any money for this? Any
we have donation? One. Yes, we have one person sponsored us. Thanks a lot, Marcus. Really appreciate that. Marcus Cumber's always been.
Oh, Marcus, Marvin Cumber boy.
So yeah, no, my stuff is films. I just like making films, documentaries, narratives, short films a ton. And yeah, well, I get to do that every now and then, so that's great.
Well, anyway, I'm going to be a little writer on residence at the theater.
Which theater?
The Cultural Foundation,
okay.
National Cultural Foundation, for 2 months,
right.
I think, okay? And they have a program they just started, and I would like to see if we can do anything together to help the young ladies there to, you know, begin to get some life into it. The structures are there, but the life is, I don't see the life, you know?
Yeah. Let me know. I'd be happy to.
Because for one thing, I always say to people, this is not just about technology. Art is not just about technology. It's about being able to reach people or to reach each other on a different channel than the one in which we're always going. God knows that when we started the Cayman National Youth Theater in I think it was in 78 or 79. Teresa Lewis and all, Picarian and those people, tons of them. I never realized that anything could have gone this far, but truth was, Jim Borden was the guy who came to me. Mr. Jim came to me, and Mr. Jim came with an idea. Mr. Jim had an idea of the cultural and the sport and all those things together. Mr. Jim paid me $1,000 a month for quite a while to write a history of the Cayman Islands. And I said, I'm not writing no history of the Cayman Islands. I need the money, but I can't do it because I said, if I speak about Cayman Islands and use the word black or African or slavery, I say these people will now butcher me. Because they're not going to accept that there was any slavery or anything like that, especially coming from me.
Right.
So, but it was Mr. Jim who helped with the museum and getting the papers together. It was his interest.
Right.
And we have a lot to thank him for.
Right.
When they got him there as national hero, people forgot that the man had a heart and the man had an intellect, the man had an interest that was really very unique. And I love him because I know he was a gangster. And I knew, and I found out a lot about gangs in Cayman with the Jimmy Hoffa people, and you had people like they call the Help Society. They were all people who were merchant marines or former merchant seamen that were part of that Teamsters mentality that Jimmy Hoffa control. That's why Jimmy Hoffa had such a big say here. And then many people believe that Jimmy Hoffa was actually murdered in Cayman Islands and disposed of here.
Okay.
And I've been looking at that for a long time as a possibility and actually investigating it.
Oh yeah?
And it ties together.
Huh. So what would he have been doing here?
Well, you see that people that see that crime has always been a part of government. Criminal activities.
Sure.
So government has always, had to have their gangsters. They had to have their executioners. They had to have the people who can do their.
I want to do some more research on him.
Jimmy Hoffa?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it would be a nice idea, a nice project, because if you look at when he was seen at the Seaview Hotel by a friend of mine who worked at Seaview Hotel, I think 7 days before he went initially, it was announced that he went missing. Some people say one guy who worked with immigration, Mario Rankin in particular, said that he took one look one time, he didn't see notice, he didn't believe it. But I believe that I even know the person who did it or was involved in it, one of the people who were involved in it. But it was where he came. I heard he came with 2 suitcases full of money.
What was he going to do with that?
Well, we have to go to the West Shore Center and find out.
The West Shore Center of all places.
Yeah.
What was happening?
That was one that was opened in '84.
As late as early as '84, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, because I can remember when that was going up.
Yeah, '84.
Huh.
So when we look at but if you look at who Jimmy Hoffa was, he was connected to Richard Nixon. Mm-hmm. If you look at Richard Nixon, and you know what Richard Nixon did, right? He
took us off the gold standard?
Huh?
Took us off the gold standard.
Exactly.
Is that what you're going to say, or are you going to say something else?
Well, that was what I was going to say.
All right.
But he wasn't doing that by himself. He was doing that for the boys in Texas.
Which boys in Texas?
Like John Connolly and people like that.
Why did they need that? Why did they need the U.S. dollar to get unpegged from gold?
Because then you can invest, because there's no restriction, because you don't have no restriction. You just print.
Right.
And that's how you develop China.
And that's where we are now.
Right. And that's
Saudi Arabia just said we're not trading in US dollars with our oil anymore. Right,
because they're playing the game back. They're rolling the carpet back.
But you're saying that this is what Egypt did.
Yeah, well, what do you mean?
Like it printed fiat. They didn't use hard currency.
Well, I mean, what they do is they bartered.
Oh, basically. Yeah, they said they bartered.
Bartered.
I do some research on that.
The bartering, they bartered a lot. I mean, there was bartering, a lot of bartering, because really, basically, it all have to do. So you don't know about Bitcoin, or you
don't do any research on Bitcoin?
No, I don't know anything about Bitcoin. But I mean, what little I hear about Bitcoin in terms of they're building it, because if you look seriously at what happened to Africa and how Putin played everybody, you have to look at the Russian Orthodox Church. Them is the geniuses behind this. They put Putin in power. This is a Russian thing. They were promised long time ago that Russia would be introduced into the West, become a part of the West.
Right.
And it never happened.
Right.
And the Russian Orthodox Church, which is a part of the Empire Church of Christianity, they got to the point where they decided to do something about it. The Russian Revolution was in
early 1900s?
Was in
1910s?
1917.
Right.
And the Trump Revolution was in 2017.
So you think that it's a Trump revolution?
It's a Russian revolution. The Trump thing is all a Russian thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because Trump's wife is a KGB. She trained by the KGB.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Look, you can look at her.
She looks like a KGB agent.
I live in them countries, okay?
She looks like that movie Salt. Yeah. With what her name is now, the actress Angelina Jolie.
Right. And then she comes from Dracula to
oh man.
Yeah. So what? No, what I'm saying is, look at it. I'm looking at it humorously. Mm-hmm. But the point is look. January the 6th is the date of the epiphany. Epiphany. You know what that is? When they saw the three wise men. When the three wise men saw the star.
Right.
Why would they choose that date to attack the capital city?
That was the same day? January 6th is the day of the Epiphany? Epiphany. How interesting. So what's the connection there? The philosophical question.
Because...
Connection. Monday, January 6th. Wow. I didn't quite put that together.
No,
why that day then?
I put that together for
So
me.
January, nothing to escape you like that, yo.
Yeah.
So what does January? How is January 6th related to the story of the Epiphany when the wise men followed the star to Bethlehem?
Yeah, because it's about the message being for a specific group of people and not for all the people. The Christianity that we have growing up in America now is not for everybody. It is for our people. There are people who they think their people are. My stepson went to two Christian schools in California over the last few years. Mm-hmm. He went to Village Christian first. Santa Clarissa, he went to first. And they took him there. I remember I interviewed, I had to pray on and everything. And they had to show the people that you were a Christian. And they went there and they seemed to have had a little bit of problem after a while with the two Caymanian boys that were there. So they went on to another school called Village Christian, which he just graduated from. I was talking about being in California to that graduation because he went to the school.
Okay.
And these people are, in terms of Christianity, it is like a politics. So what is the difference between your religion and your politics? None whatsoever. So if you're religious, then you're political. And this is what is being shown. And this is where the difficulties are happening and what's coming out. So what Trump has done, when he's got the support, the 82% or something support of the evangelical Christian in the last election, it shows. Now, who are these evangelical Christians connected to? The Third Temple in Israel.
What's that again?
The Third Temple. They're building back the temple for worship.
Okay.
So that the Messiah can come.
Right.
So their idea is that these Jewish people fooled them again. And they stuck them in a situation. This is why they're in Palestine and they're doing all the foolishness and nobody knows what's going on. And where these people come from?
Nobody knows what's going on. I can agree with that.
Yeah, nobody knows what's going on. So what's going on? Well, Netanyahu, what is his name again? Netanyahu. I can never pronounce Netanyahu. I can never pronounce his name. But you imagine these guys. These are all European Jews, you know. Mm-hmm. These are all European Jews. And I look at what's going on in Ukraine. Who you think it is Jews again? So what I'm saying is that in that you have to understand it's a caste system. Mm-hmm. So there's several different castes. We're always looking at Jews as one caste of people. You got to look at these people and they're wearing black, and so I recognize them as Jews. That's not it. Look, when you talk about Cyrus the Great, and you
who's that one now?
Cyrus, the one that Isaiah talks about in Isaiah.
Okay.
That God has chosen.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So they compare Donald Trump with him, you know. And this and all of this has been low enough from Reagan time and all of that, you know. Mm-hmm. This come out of Hollywood.
Very interesting that you think it's since Reagan time, because I do agree with that. Because
if you go back and you read and you see the movie El Cid and the Ten Commandments, and that's all coming out of Russia. Them was all Russian Jews that come out into this thing and started this thing. They understand exactly what's going on. It is so elevated, and that we would have, even at this particular time, with this dimensional thinking and the videos and all of the technology that we have, and all these things are happening.
I think you need to study Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the things that you're talking about here, these castes and these influences, I think are to a large extent affected because the money is broken since Nixon, since 71. And I think when a community has broken money and money that can be printed, it creates a lot of distortions in society. And I think that's what you're talking about now. Well, and I think that it is imperative for us to get onto hard money as soon as possible. And I think Bitcoin represents that.
Well, I mean, I'm not a person who believes in the money systems. I don't think that there can be a fair money system.
I recommend reading Bitcoin. I mean, that's the thing about Bitcoin. It's fair. First of all, I mean, just to let you know in fairness, the ethicalness of Bitcoin, it's free for anyone. Anyone can get Bitcoin. All right, it's not free to get, but it's accessible by everyone. It has no KYC. You don't need permission to send it to anyone. You can just send it. Right? It's permissionless. And it's open.
I'm saying is that the situation is much tougher, much more bitter than the issue of the currency and different things.
I think they're related, but fair. They're you know.
I mean, when we look at where Obama got. Obama's name is Obama. What is his name? Barack Hussein.
Right.
Obama.
Right.
And you just hung Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
How do you manage to convince people? People don't think, they're not watching all of this. But when they put him in there, what's his job? To kill Gaddafi? To kill Gaddafi?
I was just watching a podcast where they talked about the reason that they killed Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi was because both of them, again, comes down to currency, wanted to start trading their oil in other currencies beside the U.S.
Yeah, but that was part of it.
So currency plays in those two debts.
Money and trade is power. Trade is power.
Sure.
So we get our power not by being static or stagnant. We get our power by trade, by movement.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, if you watch it and how everything was lined up, who is behind it is not the American politician. American politics is not run by American politicians. It's obvious.
Right.
How did
look at the current president. It's obviously not run by him.
That's right.
That's right. I think it's just kind of.
And look. You see Pamela?
Which Pamela? Kamala. Yeah.
Kamala. You see, she looked like she's drugged. She looked like she high all the time. She looked like she drugged out, man. You imagine what the stress is?
They do seem like figureheads,
They're
like
definitely
distractions.
Totally. They don't seem real no more.
It's true.
They don't see. She doesn't seem real. They do not seem real.
They're gonna change him before the election.
The whole idea is to put him in. He dies, and she take over. Her husband is with her. That's the gatekeeper right there.
Do you think that's gonna work, or you think Trump getting in again?
Well, if Trump don't get in, then what's going to happen to America? Because it's not going to be nice if Trump don't get in.
So Trump is a positive force for America?
I don't think that Trump is a positive force for America because I think Trump has been also part of the game.
So, but you think it's worse if Biden gets in again, is what you're saying then? There's some hope if Trump gets in, although he's bad?
Look, I can't see how a lunatic like Donald Trump could help anybody.
All right.
Donald Trump has no clue about nothing in this world. The man is totally ignorant. He's ignorant.
So, okay.
I mean, if you have never been in politics, right? And somebody call you and tell you to go into politics, hey, that has to be a big master to get you in to do that at that particular age. At that age, you've never been in politics. At age, you're going to decide to go into politics?
So, but you hold on, I want to get to. So, you still think he's better than Biden, even though they're both problematic.
He works for Putin. How are you going to be better than Biden for America?
But I thought you were saying that. I thought you were saying what would happen to America if Trump doesn't get in. In other words, it would go down.
I'm saying if Trump doesn't get in, their militias might be activated. We might have problems in America. But if Trump gets in, he doesn't have any discipline, and he will just move everything aside.
He's just going to print money like how they all did. Obama too. Everyone since Nixon.
Well, I mean, they're all complicit. I mean, I'm not going to defend an American president. I believe that they're all America never gained its independence.
How do you feel about RFK Jr.?
Well, I feel that he at least telling us the truth.
Yeah.
Because he knows the truth.
Right.
Because he knows that his brothers, his uncle and his father were all assassinated. John Kennedy used to come here with Jim Borden, call back Cayman Airways from it already reached Cuba to bring it back. John Conley, the guy who was in the front seat of the car when Kennedy was assassinated.
Right. What about him?
Governor of Texas. Mm-hmm. Look at Texas today. Texas is still the place that you go in. That's still where they mob the hierarchy that controls works out of Texas. The state, the lone state of Texas.
I would like to hope RFK Jr. could do something, could just somehow be the president, just so it's not one of the other guys.
How would that gonna happen? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. Maybe if he gets on that debate stage.
I don't know.
With Trump and Biden. Maybe if he gets... Actually, to be honest, that's his only hope. Because if he doesn't get on there, then no one's really going to even know about him. Like, I know some Americans who are like, who? Who's RFK?
Well, I mean, he knows the story of what happens to his father.
Yeah, he does. Okay? He said it. I mean,
John Connolly's wife made sure that he died and they couldn't take out that bullet or piece of metal that was in there, or if it was in there. They never looked.
What's the name of that book? The famous one about JFK.
I've never read any of that.
No?
No. Mm. I stay away from those things. I look at it because I look at it and I think about it and I think about what's reasonable. I met Bobby Kennedy.
You met RFK's dad?
I met Bobby Kennedy.
Right.
Yes.
Where?
I met him at the Borough Manhattan Community College a few hours before he was murdered later down.
Wow.
That night. He was going to LaGuardia Airport, but he decided to run in there and campaign. He gave me a Black Power handshake.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and I'll never forget that this tannin lotion, I could still smell his tannin lotion.
Really?
Yeah. And it still stays like in my nostril up until today.
I feel like he did tan. I never thought about that. But he looks like a tanned individual.
He was a tan individual.
Interesting. So you met that's RFK's dad.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then Beth McField told me that she met him, the boy here, the son here, and everything like that. And I'm saying she was talking about Teacher McField and her with this. And I said, no, this can't be true, Beth. He actually came here. You all actually talked to him because, I got a Black Power handshake from this man. Before, when he was going to LaGuardia, he was just to come in there and, waiting for the plane to leave from LaGuardia, which is in Queens.
Right.
And we were in central Manhattan.
Right.
Yeah. 57th or 59th and Broadway.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
So I'm very superstitious of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I've been writing a lot of stuff to try to clear my head and to see if I could see a little bit clearer.
Right.
But if I see there's something wrong here and something wrong there, then there's no point in having false hope in the solutions that are coming from unconscious people who are not conscious of the way in which America went away from what was the American principles or the American ideals.
Right.
And I think that America when we got into the war, how did America get into the war in Vietnam? My brother was with the 101st Airborne Division, served with General Westmoreland, paratrooper. He spent 13 months in Vietnam and everything like that. And I went...
Because that happened after JFK died, right? After they assassinated him, then they moved in.
Yeah, because you see, America then becomes the giant for the world. And we're thinking it's America making those choices.
But
that wasn't American people that were making those choices.
Yeah. And here's the issue with that Vietnam War. They printed money to get in there. This is why I'll keep harping on this printed money and the Bitcoin thing, which I really think you need to study. Because if you can't print money, you can't go to war in Vietnam. And by the way, you couldn't go to Iraq either or Afghanistan. So you couldn't send aid to Ukraine, you couldn't send it to Israel, you couldn't send it to Palestine. You couldn't do any of that without printing money. So how much is that really a catalyst for war? I think that is something you should investigate.
So how do I get that information? How do I start getting that information? YouTube?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk offline and send you some stuff.
Okay, I appreciate that, because that definitely is something.
I think the sooner we get the world on that, a fair, permissionless monetary network that no one controls, I think it solves a lot of problems.
Well, Jesus said the money was a problem.
Yeah.
Didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, he pushed out the people.
Money changers and different things. I mean, but they actually, that was something that people had recognized in the empire, and the larger the empire became, the more difficult it became and using the money,
right.
And
at that point, they couldn't print money, so they would just scale off some of the gold, and then paper tokens, which weren't based on the gold. And I mean, I think it's a serious issue. It's a new issue for me, and I think this whole crypto revolution is a rebellion against that, and I think it's a good thing. I think it promises the freedom of the individual.
So how do you see then with El Salvador and its
exactly?
Do you know that the Chinese are controlling El Salvador and how they're controlling El Salvador?
I don't know anything about the Chinese and El Salvador, but I know El Salvador is putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet.
Okay, so but you know that that's how the Chinese are in there helping them solve the crime problems.
I didn't know that. I didn't. But okay.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't know that. I mean, not most people wouldn't know that. I know that through my type of research, because you know that one of the problems with El Salvador was that that was also where Che Guevara met Raúl Castro. It was there,
okay,
because it was a place where the KGB operated.
Okay.
So many of those countries where the KGB operated, I mean, KGB has changed in terms of how it operates and who it is and what it is now. It's not the same.
Right.
But those people have played a big role, and even in terms of the movie industries and the different things like that, these people have moved around, and it's not like that's one of the reasons why I mentored the Russian Orthodox Church. This is not the same kind of movement that it was before. This is not where people can look and say, "Oh, that's a communist," or "This is just don't," because it was never about a particular ideology. It was always about a set group of people being included in the running of an empire. And there's a book that I have read, and it's called The Final Warning. It's by a Canadian that was written some time ago. And my brother got it through a parliamentary prayer breakfast here in Cayman. My brother, who was in Vietnam, who died a few years ago, George Vernon McField. And then I went to see the premiere and a few months ago, and she said, I went to show her the book, and she said, "You look what," she said, "Hard, right?" And so I said, "Well, we got a lot of people here now who are involved in politics and involved in this same evangelical movement for those people to take seats." So if you watch what's happening in our country, and the Cayman Islands, are people who are going to be more of a religious disposition, strong religious disposition, that are going to try to get political office based upon that. But the point is that these people know nothing about the religion. They never really studied the religion. They don't know that at the end of the day, much of this has to do with how hierarchy is created, how hierarchy is disseminated, and how it's the reconnection occurs. We have to do something in the world, because basically it's not just a question with cash and that particular type of thing. It's a question of the fact that how do you stop from underdeveloping something that you want to develop when you're trading with it. You're going to trade with these people and you want to be fair, but at the end of the day, you end up with this and they end up with that. It's not necessarily a deliberate thing. It's part of that dynamics. It's part of the dynamics that is an unequal yoke. It's an unyoking, it's an unequal relationship to a certain extent. So we need to be looking at how overall we will begin to construct a world that is interested in maintaining itself in terms of the continuity from generation to generation, in terms of the stability that is dependent upon a much more balanced and holistic view of how we maintain life. If we look at nature, nature tells us how to do it, because we look at the whole system that of nature is that nothing gets lost. Everything is reverted back into the system. So it's a holistic, it's a continuous system. And I would think taking an interest in that whole idea, why do people feel that communism, or the whole idea of communism, is wrong. Now, communism, from the point of view of the experiment that we saw in Russia, is horrific, it's horrible. And maybe we might say also that capitalism is horrible because of the conditions, again, that if capitalism had the ideal condition, it would have been different. I don't know. But the people in the early church that were talking about the way in which they developed, in which we develop as a humanity, because you got to realize now that our intellectuals were coming from the church. They were in the church. And they were concerned about the different kinds of different stages of development in terms of economic development. Now, when we got into the disastrous thing called African slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, it ruined everything. It distorted everything. And although we had the Protestant Revolution happening at the same time, just about, it destroyed the principles of what Martin Luther of Germany wanted to achieve. So we found ourselves in a kind of weird relationship with capitalism. It wasn't what the church wanted. It is not what the gospel encourages, but they went along with it and lived with it somehow. So I
think you're gonna love Bitcoin.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, you think that it comes also through the new currency, comes also through this new revelation, this revelation, because a lot of people don't believe that we're in a time of revelation, but we are in revelation.
I mean, I think a lot of people feel that. I mean, we just had a pandemic a couple of years ago. That seemed very apocalyptic.
That's right. It is. It was. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, the world's only getting smaller. It's not getting bigger. We're closing in. Yeah. We've already expanded as far as we can go. Now we just close in on everything. So I feel like there's always going to be that looming apocalyptic threat more than ever.
At Smith Badir yesterday, I saw a bird, and the bird was diving and coming up with a fish. It was going down like 5-10 minutes and coming up with a little small fish and things like that. I saw the bird there again this morning. But of course, I swim there very often. I've seen the bird, but I've never seen a bird do that. And I had the opportunity to see a bird do that. Now, there's so much that we don't see in this life, but we still assume that we know. And I know you can't change people by saying to them, you didn't see, so how do you know? Because they're going to always say, somebody told me so. Authority told me so. My mama says so. My daddy says so. The judge says so. Who said so? Because we're always borrowing. We're always borrowing, living on something other than ourself. Our own capacities. And that is one of the reasons why we have trade, and that's one of the reasons why we enter into difficulties, because of this whole idea that we're not confined to anything. We are always reaching out in ways that allow us to be manipulated by systems or by people who think a little bit more about how to capture that. Let's see how we can pen them up there. They're doing the same thing, but now somebody's figuring out how to entrap them, But everything in nature was put there to be able to do for itself. Because when I'm talking about the bird and how the bird can do that, how does it have the capacity to go down into the water, swim in under there, all of this. So this means that we're living in a world, you could call it magical, we call supernatural, probably is perhaps a better word to use.
Right.
You get in less trouble with that. That's acceptable still, supernatural.
Right.
And it's this thing. So it is possible that we would not have come up with this conversation today if it wasn't supernatural. Because how do you get to the point? How do you get to the point? But everything that has happened here, and we have raised, it's like we were on the same wavelength. It's like we were on the same wavelength. And although the way in which I've covered this or tried to relate to this and try to be as spontaneous as possible with this, it comes back to the whole idea of currency. And
so you're agreeing with me?
I am agreeing with you.
Okay,
and I'm agreeing with you because I understood this in the Egyptian civilization.
How?
That somehow they had worked it, that everything flowed because it's like energy.
Right.
And it flows.
Right, it is like energy. And currency is energy, it's economic energy. It's money it's energy that has been that you've used, that you accumulate.
So that was a secret that the Egyptian had mastered.
Sure, you can see it in the pyramids.
That was a secret that they had mastered. I spent enough time over the years now studying the Egyptians and trying to understand, and that was a secret that they had mastered.
So you know what? My Bitcoin friends would love to meet you.
Okay.
Oh wow! So you got to come to the next Bitcoin meeting, I think.
Look. It was something that, of course, I gave some thought to when I found out that it's all energy and the way the energy flows. And I actually met a young lady who came to her mother's relative funeral maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago here, and I met her and her sister. And the mother, of course, is Caymanian and very interesting people. Just one lives in New Jersey, and she trades in bitcoins. And we had quite a good a few chats, and, and things like that. But I was hoping to do something with her at some particular point, when I start getting my stuff moving forward.
I think when you do some more studying on Bitcoin, you'll be ready to meet her again and see. And I think, the whole energy thing, you'll like how energy is tied into Bitcoin. I'm sure you've heard Bitcoin uses so much energy. So like that's a very interesting connection between currency, understanding that it's energy and that flow, and how Bitcoin is tied to energy. But I'm going to have to go.
Yeah. But
it's been great.
Yeah, man. I hope it hasn't been too long.
No, man. It's been great. I really appreciate it. I definitely wanted to, when I was a teenager, I would see you in the newspapers, and, I guess I read some of your stuff, and then, as a politician, and then a very unique individual who I kind of related to, I guess. And, yeah, so definitely always, I would always say hi to you when I would see you in public, and you'd be like, hey, who's this guy? But I knew you, I knew your face. So I would say hi, right? And I think, but over the years, I think you began to see me enough times to be like, okay.
I recognize you. Yeah, but I would just say that, I did Public Eye, a show called Public Eye. I don't know if you remember it.
Yeah, it rings a bell.
Yeah. It was brought to you by the New Vision movement. And I started Public Eye after I got elected in '96. I got elected in November '96, and then I started Public Eye show the next year.
Okay.
And I ran it until 2007.
Okay.
So I have about 10 years of Public Eye shows, and they were done not about once a month, at least once a month.
Wow.
So
where are those?
Those shows I got when they were closing down West Star TV.
And it's a TV show.
They gave me a disc of it, and I've been trying to get them downloaded on YouTube.
Yes.
so that people can go and look at some of the topics that were being discussed. Some of the people like Craig Marin and Frankie Flowers' sister. I don't think we had Frankie Flowers on any of the particular talk show because Frankie wasn't a talker, you know.
Right.
But his sister
Dara.
Yeah. And Faye Geely.
Yes, Faith.
There was Faith, yeah. There were two. I did an interview with the two girls.
Yeah.
I did an interview also with Ori Marin.
Okay.
Ori Marin.
Okay. Oh, so you were doing this show before I was doing the show.
Yeah. I mean, I did it with those kids. And what's interesting, for instance, like Ori Marin, for instance, what he was talking about immigration. All that time ago, people are talking about it now.
All right.
And they're still not doing nothing about it in that particular way. But it just goes to show that if we look at our resources, we'll find that we can learn also from our mistakes. And our mistakes sometimes is just that we need a little bit more time to look at some things before we can make a choice about them.
There you go.
So I don't feel no way in that sense of my life. I felt that my life was a good life. It's a good life because it was a journey. It was a search. It wasn't me standing and waiting to be fed.
Sure.
But my walking in the wilderness.
Nice. I love that. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for being on the show. And
thanks for having me. I really appreciate that.